as far as like China having its own backyard and the entire Asian continent cleared of like American intervention so they can do trade maxing to the best of their ability by rail and you know, develop their supply lines in the way that they want to. Beijing-Tehran shared interests go beyond security. Beijing-Tehran ties can deepen to include more durable energy deals, oil, gas, renewables, major Chinese investment in Chabahar as a counter to U.S. corridors, and tech transfer in cutting-edge fields like AI. At the SCO summit, Pezeshkian welcomed China's call for reform in global governance. He backed SCO financial cooperation to cut dollar dependence, new rapid crisis response mechanisms, SCO Strategic Studies Center, Chabahar linking China, Central Asia, and the Indian Ocean. Iran sees the SCO's 10-year strategy as a chance to anchor itself in a multipolar order. Beijing's support in infrastructure and defense will hinge on Tehran showing long-term commitment and on how the U.S. and Europe will engage with Iran. China's invitation for Iran to its World War II Victory Day military parade while excluding Israel, the U.S. and EU, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE is telling. The message, Iran is part of Beijing's envisioned multipolar order. How we even ended up here is absurd. I think many people will say Trump is the reason for this. I think that's incorrect. I think Trump is simply the accelerant. Okay, that's
Despite
it.
a long-running...
I think Trump is simply the accelerant. Trump is giving the much-needed push to all of these other periphery countries by behaving in this inconsistent and irrational manner. But overall, like, global designs such as this one do not exchange hands overnight. They don't... You can't turn the tide of history with one leadership over the next. It's not like this has been a long time coming. This is decades of sanctions and America basically turning China into the manufacturing hub of the entire planet. It's a long time. That gave China a tremendous political influence and power because it caused it basically made China intervention proof. Because you can't destroy your own manufacturing hub. It started with the shit talking during COVID that started the polarization Biden wrapped up. No. It's far before COVID. No. This is far before COVID. COVID could be seen as another accelerant, and Trump certainly is an accelerant, but I wouldn't say that it's like one singular event. But it definitely... Ne oldu, gittiler mi? Niye gelsin orada oynasın onlar? Okay, gitsin ıslansın. Bırak sen. Açık kalsın, sıkıntı yok. Yeah. Is that a Jeffrey Epstein tattoo on his hand? Yeah, he loves him. He loves Jeffrey. Anyway, let's look at TLDR News Global. Why China's economy is stalling.
Property crisis and Trump's unprecedented tariffs, the Chinese economy has held up surprisingly well. Domestically, declines in property investment have been mostly offset by increased investment in high-tech manufacturing. And while exports to the US have fallen somewhat, they haven't fallen as much as you might expect. And Chinese producers have apparently been able to offset any decline by just redirecting their exports elsewhere, including to Europe. Nonetheless, in the past month or so, the Chinese economy has shown new signs of strain, and a combination of debt and deflation take their toll on industry. So in this video, we're going to explain how the Chinese economy outperformed expectations over the past couple of years, and what's gone wrong. Have you ever wondered how much money TLDR makes each year? Or who's funding our journalism? Well, we think transparency is super important. So we answer both questions in our recent video. It's linked in the description. Business investment, household consumption, and the sum of four things. Governments be unbalanced. In short, GDP is defined as economic woes. You need to understand how the Chinese economy is fundamentally unbalanced. In short, GDP is defined as the sum of four things. Government spending, business investment, household consumption, and the difference between exports and imports. In China, consumption accounts for a lower than average share of GDP, while investment and net exports account for a higher than average share. A recent analysis by the University of Groningen found that, in 2019, household consumption accounted for
It's really hard for me to value Western perspective on China's economy because they do have a different system and priorities. I know. And for the record, this has been a major issue for Western analysts from the jump. Okay? Western analysts refuse to contend with, they only look at the Chinese economy and Chinese goals from a Western lens, a Western capitalist lens that focuses on the GDP. One of the best examples that I can point to you as far as trying to fit Chinese governance into a Western lens and failing to understand what's going on in China has been ghost cities, right? For the longest time, Western analysts looked at China and said, oh, these guys are so stupid. They're just trying to do economic output domestically by building all these cities, but haha, these cities are all empty. These are ghost cities. Look at how stupid they are. Look at how silly they are, right? And that is because in America and in the Western world broadly, you look at home ownership not as a means of shelter, but as a means of economic activity. Okay, it's supposed to be an asset, a speculative asset to be traded on the stock market. So they don't actually realize that like a government could have broad-reaching, multiple decades-long agendas to rapidly urbanize, for example. This is just not a thing that is within the Western liberal field of vision, right? So because we don't have any sort of like real long-term planning, or even if we do have long-term planning, our long-term planning is still very much at the behest of capital. We can't even see a world outside of that horse blinders that we have on. And oftentimes this is the reason why Western analysis on China, but the power that he does have is a very important regional power he is using to prop up Modi like this. And the reason why he's doing that is because this is, once again, America's major bulwark in the region against growing Chinese influence. So it's purely self-interested from the Chinese perspective.
Will be established, with some pushing for an independent payment system to reduce dependence on the dollar and circumvent Western sanctions.
In the face of a resurgence of unilateral bullying, the summit issued a statement firmly supporting the multilateral trading system with the World Trade Organization at its core. It called for the elimination of unilateral practices that violate WTO rules, sending a clear message of rejecting hegemony and upholding fairness, and voicing a shared commitment to maintaining an open world economy.
China has pledged to provide $280 million in aid and loans to member states and expand educational opportunities. Numerous meetings were held on the sidelines, which provided an opportunity for Putin to brief Modi and Xi on his summit with US President Donald Trump in Alaska last month, a meeting he said he hoped would pave the way to peace in Ukraine. Katrina Yu, Al Jazeera, Tianjin, China.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable.
We're trade maxing.
New comments from Chinese leader Xi Jinping, who took a veiled dig at the U.S. as he promoted his vision of a new global order. Xi told leaders at a major summit, quote, "The house rules of a few countries should not be imposed by others." He said more as well.
We should advocate for an equal and orderly, multipolar world and a universally beneficial and inclusive economic globalization, and make the global governance system more just and equitable.
What truly interesting is who was there rubbing shoulders with Xi. Russia's Vladimir Putin and India's Narendra Modi all shared a laugh with the Chinese leader on the sidelines, really almost literally.
Dude, I don't understand one thing here. Like, if I'm a remotely competent European leader, I'm trying to bring Chinese investment into the European continent to the best of my ability. Okay? I'm trying to set up as many cooperation agreements with China as I possibly can. I'm like petitioning the EU to be like, dude, we got to fucking lean into this China shit. It doesn't make any fucking sense that you're looking at the situation and the lordship over there is demanding more in tithing from you. And all of these leaders around you in Europe are going, yes, sir. Yes, master. We will give you whatever you want to America. Like, there is no way out of this. There's no way out of this without like leaning into the same exact leverage point that every other global South country has leaned into, which is developing separate agreements with China. Like, even if you're not going to fully cooperate with China, it doesn't make any sense that you would not at least try to get a better deal out of the United States of America by leaning in that direction in the same way that like even fucking India is doing, you know? And I genuinely don't see it. I don't understand it. And if you talk to like Europe politicians, if you talk to European politicians, if you talk to politicians that have existed under the security banner of America in any NATO nation, they literally are just like, nah, dude, you cannot trust the Chinese. Straight up, you cannot trust the Chinese ever. That is unironically their position. They're like, look, America is great. It's helpful. It's helped us. It helped us prosper post World War II. We were really scared about socialism growing. We did not want that to happen. That's why we found ourselves in the comfortable bosom of American security. But like in the EU especially, or even in like Japan, on the one hand, there are obviously because of its proximity, there are a lot of important trade relations with China. But in the EU, while there is important trade relations with China, they are totally it's a non-starter. The notion that like you would ever do any sort of like leaning towards China is a non-starter. Even if it's a point of leverage.
Rubbing shoulders. For Modi, it was his first trip to China in 7 years. Let's get right to CNN's Ivan Watson, who is in Tianjin.
Sweet Bear, bro, China is the enemy here, and I've never had a politician explain why. I mean, the question remains, the USSR was the enemy as well. It's just like, what's the reason? Because like everything you could point to the USSR with respect to USSR being the enemy, America has done tenfold. You know what I mean? Like you say, oh, encroachment. They're forcibly controlling they're forcibly controlling all these like Eastern Bloc countries, and that's bad. And it's like, okay, but then America's doing their own version of that, maybe with a more quote unquote peaceful approach, seemingly. But as far as like imperialism goes, they continued that tenfold, propping up military dictatorships, propping up fascist dictatorships, overthrowing people's interest in maintaining their own sovereignty, autonomy, voting democratically for, social democrats or socialists, God forbid. Like, even when we talk about Chinese imperialism in Africa, this is a great example of this. Like, do you see what I mean? This is what I mean. Everything that you can point to with respect to the USSR or even China now, America's doing tenfold and has done so tenfold, which is precisely the reason why these guys in these respective nations have decided to align with China over America because they at least look at it and go, well, they don't have 400 years of chattel slavery that they can point to, and also their loans are better. And this is a reality that even American thinkers and American analysts are aware of. Like, this is the Chinese imperialism and Africa narrative. The Belt and Road Initiative is imperialism narratives. They got a lot of play in the DC think tank foreign policy sector for quite a while. But the new meta now is to actually recognize that Chinese loans offer far more favorable conditions than the IMF and the World Bank ever could. And there's a lot of loan forgiveness that comes along with it as well. And therefore, you have thinkers that write for, Foreign Policy Mag and stuff like that openly will say, we have to get better. We have to deliver better, more peaceful, and less interventionist loans than China is doing, than China is offering. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization SCO summit in Tianjin is a key gathering for Iran after the U.S.-Israel war. Tehran is set to deepen its relationship with China in a way it hasn't before, moving beyond its past short-term crisis-driven outreach. This is SCO's largest summit since its 2001 founding. Over 20 countries plus at least 10 international bodies, including the UN Secretary General, are present. The scale reflects how China is filling the gaps left by Trump's disruption of the global order. For Iran, the timing is crucial. The E3, Germany, UK, France just triggered the snapback of UN sanctions. Iran is still reeling from the aftershocks of war with Israel and the US. Significantly at Tianjin, SCO leaders condemned the US and Israel attack on Iran in June. Foreign Minister Arakshi, alongside his Russian and Chinese counterparts, sent a joint letter to the UN rejecting the snapback. They argued it lacks legal basis and is politically destructive. For Tehran, this is a rare moment of visible backing from two global powers at a key moment. China and Russia join Iran in rejecting the European move to restore sanctions on Tehran. A letter from the Chinese, Russian, and Iranian foreign ministers called Britain, France, and Germany's move to restore sanctions via the snapback mechanism legally and procedurally flawed. What's interesting about this is that, yes, on the one hand, you got Russia making these sorts of statements, and you go, well, okay, you're Russia. You deserve the sanctions for your encroachments, your irredentist actions in Ukraine, your fucking war that you're waging in Ukraine. But on the other hand, if you were to put yourself in the shoes of Iranian leadership for a brief moment, you would kind of recognize that Western nations are doing that to Iran in an even more unjustifiable, with an even more unjustifiable reason when you consider it, additional sanctions and this aggressive enforcement that seeks to cripple the Iranian economy even further, to starve out the Iranian economy even further, is utterly ridiculous. Contrary to much of Western analysis, Iran hasn't decisively pivoted to China yet. It often abandoned Beijing for short-term openings with the U.S. and EU efforts Israel has successfully blocked. China, for its part, has long showed strategic mistrust of Iran. Even Xi Jinping's 2016 $40 billion offer for rail, refiner, and power plant investments was sidelined. Iran gave South Pars contracts to total over Chinese firms after the JCPOA. The 25-year roadmap proved symbolic for Iran. Beijing saw Tehran turn to it only in times of crisis. But Iran has always been unimaginably invested in maintaining sovereignty. Okay, I'm not making an assessment on whether this is good or bad. I'm just telling you that they've always chosen sovereignty and also leveraging the reverse relationship that they don't even have with Western powers against China with regular frequency. If you have all of these, if you have nations in Africa leveraging the pre-existing harm that they saw from Western powers to create an environment of cooperation with China, Iran, for some weird reason, has done the exact opposite, where time and time again they have shown mistrust to China. Even when China is demonstrated that they have a strategic interest in cooperating with Iran as their own little bulwark against Western imperialism in the region. Russia is not irredentis Lamau, just the irrational justification of Putin's dumbass gave for a rational invasion after they were left no choice thanks to NATO threatening to have nukes positioned at Kharkiv at a distance equivalent to Detroit to DC to Moscow. It is absolutely irredentis. If we know that there was never going to be NATO encroachment in Ukraine, you think Vladimir Putin miscalculated that? No, of course he didn't. There was already pre-existing instability in LPR and DPR, and they had already annexed Crimea. It is absolutely an additional push for more land and more control over Ukraine. It's ridiculous. Come on, please stop. Now the Iranian calculus may be shifting. Iranian Defense Minister Nazirizadeh at the SCO. Orgs like Shanghai and BRICS can substitute unilateralism by forming new alliances. Regional security will be ensured with SCO cooperation. Iran is signaling readiness for deeper long-term cooperation with China. This stretches from Afghanistan to the Persian Gulf to Xinjiang and shaping the future of Central Asia, South Asia, and the Caucasus in the wake of the IMEC and the Trump corridor. I'm not saying this because I'm Turkish and I do often meme about Turkey being at the table, but a key component of this, or I guess like the last remaining castle for American imperialism in this region would be Turkey, because every single Turkic region that spans from China all the way to Europe is still very much aligned with Turkey here and get logistical training and supplies from the Turkish military. And therefore, Turkey being the NATO nation that it is a very important factor. But the power that he does have is a very important regional power he is using to prop up Modi like this. And the reason why he's doing that is because